Hello, Dental A Team listeners. This is Kiera Dent, and I just wanted to say thank you so much for being part of my Dental A Team family. I seriously love doing this podcast. I thought I was going to hate it, and I love it. I love it so much because I get to connect with you. I get to hear how this podcast is helping you and your practice be better. So if you have loved this podcast and you are willing to share, I would greatly appreciate if you'll share with your friends, if you'll leave us a review, if you'll give us 5 stars, anything you can do. Just like you guys grow your practices, we're trying to grow this podcast to positively impact the world of dental. This is how we get to grow our Dental A Team family. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoy the show. Hey everyone, welcome to the Dental A Team podcast. We're your hosts, Kiera Dent
and Dr. Mark Costas.
Mark and I had this crazy idea that maybe we could combine a dentist and a team member's perspective because let's face it, dentistry can be a challenging profession with those two perspectives. And Dental A Team podcast was created.
I'm a practicing dentist, a multiple practice owner, a dental performance coach, and the founder of the Dental Success Institute.
I've been a dental assistant, treatment coordinator, scheduler, biller, office manager, current practice owner, and international dental consultant. Mark and I don't just understand you, we are you.
Our goal is to positively impact the world of dentistry by sharing our lessons learned from the road in hundreds of dental offices.
2 perspectives, 1 mission, to help dental professionals reach their full potential. Welcome to the Dental A Team podcast. Hello, Dental A Team listeners. This is Kiera, and guess what, you guys? Summer Kassmel and I are back on the mics today, and believe it or not, Summer and I are actually not the same person, even though Summer was just asked the other day. We also don't live in the same state, but she is one of my dearest friends and one of the people I look up to the most. So Summer, how are you today? It's so good to have you back.
I am so good. Yes, I was actually on a call with somebody and they called me Kiera and I was like, no, we're not the same person.
I take that as a massive compliment. And
exactly. Me too.
People will go to events together with Mark Costas, and it's funny because people will come find us to find the other person. Like, hey, Kiera, where's Summer? And I'm like, I don't have a tracking on her, but I do love that we're one and the same, Summer. I take that as a massive compliment because you're one of my heroes. I think there was another masterminder this weekend who said Summer Kassmel is not only gorgeous inside and out, but she's also a freaking wizard and like genius when it comes to business. And I was like, I could not agree more with that compliment. So,
well, that's sweet. I don't know if any of that's true, but I appreciate it.
It's definitely true. So Summer and I just came, we will have to do a podcast for certain because our Women Dentist Connect event, Summer, let's just talk about magic right there.
Man.
It was incredible.
It really was. I couldn't have been more grateful for that opportunity. And I think that's really what it came down to, is getting to sit with those women. Like, oh my heavens. Like, it was just, I couldn't have felt more gratitude to be able to sit with them and have that time and really watch light bulbs go off for them. Like, oh, there's nothing better. Is there? I don't think so.
It was amazing. And I felt like we got really, really blessed with the audience that came and the people that were there, because it really did create that safe environment that was our whole purpose, was to really bring women together to help them just feel empowered and to ask the questions that they didn't feel safe to ask elsewhere. So we will definitely do a podcast of a recap of WDC, but don't worry guys, we are doing it next year. So if you want to pop in, you want to join us, we are doing it next year in September. So head on over. We're going to do that. But Summer, we're going to switch gears and let's go into a topic that you and I have. It's very interesting how we work, Summer, because as you were listing topics this morning, I was like, so crazy, because in my world, without even talking to you, very similar topics, which is, I think, one reason you and I are great friends. Our minds literally do think the same. So let's dive into the onboarding and hiring, and let's dive into this, because you and I have been thinking of different ideas simultaneously.
Yeah. Well, what I find is, and it's funny because my practice director, Debbie, who I know has also been on your podcast, but we were, at our mastermind meeting this weekend. And when we weren't actually working, we, kind of in it, we were talking to each other. And I said, what are the biggest hurdles that will keep us from scaling to yet another practice, or scaling to multi-million, or scaling however it is you want to scale? And I realized so much of it is really shortening that onboarding process. And when I watch offices, I always joke that, like, growing consistently, I loved, I think it was Alex Jeffries actually who was saying, you can have all the best systems, but it's still a people business. And so
Amen.
how do we actually circumvent a lot of the just craziness of onboarding and get really good, consistent team members? Because we all know how hard it is to really get them up to speed. And then when you finally do, God forbid, they choose to work someplace else and you just spent 6 months doing it.
That's always the perfect word, training mill. Fantastic. Like we train really great people to leave.
Training mill is the right word sometimes. My practice director would say that. And that was just it. Is sometimes it's the same person who's trying to do it and they get burnt out, or, the process is arduous and the poor new team member is overwhelmed, I find. Or even worse, I find, we have to just throw them in sink or swim and kind of cross our fingers that they make it out on the other side, not too battered or bruised and still hanging on, And so I see that often, like in these offices, as they're trying to grow and scale, that is just such a huge problem for them. So I told Debbie, I said, I think if we could actually figure out a smarter way to do this, we have the onboarding packets, we have the 30, 60, 90-day expectations. But I think you and I were both saying what's funny is we both came to the conclusion, completely separate of each other, which is funny, is it really comes down to first hiring exceptionally well. And then second to that, streamlining the onboarding process by using more web-based learning ahead of time and then leaving that, like, throw them to the wolves as a last resort, not the first resort.
Right, exactly. And what I want to point out is this came about for both you and I from asking better questions. Like we asked the questions to get us there. So I was thinking like, okay, if I want to get more consultants in, what is our hurdle? Like, why is it taking us so long to hire and get consultants in on the field? And I thought, well, it's honestly our hiring process. Like that is the number one area. And I also asked the questions at my quarterly meeting of what's preventing us from growing? And the answer was, it's hiring. I'm struggling to hire, but it's not hiring per se. Like we're good at hiring, finding people. We weren't good at getting them through our process quickly. It took us like 3, 4, 5 months. And I'm like, our stuff's not that impressive to get them up to speed. We're just not doing this process correctly. But Summer, just like you said, like what's preventing us from scaling to this amount and this amount and this amount? I really have found that the way you improve your business, the fastest and most efficient way is asking better questions. And so both you and I, for me, it was, well, I've been taking consultants on the road with me. It's the showing them, it's the show, tell, do. Let me talk about all those processes. And I was like, wait a second, why don't we do this online to where they have to do things remotely? They watch videos that we've already recorded of me being in an office. And then we create quiz questions for them to make sure they're picking up on things. And then I test them, not test, but just see how they do from the information they learned, to see if our information was delivering the results we're looking for, but also to make sure that they could do this before I send them on the road. So it's like two different worlds, but very similar thought processes that I think applies to everybody that we're talking to today. So Summer, let's talk about some of your ideas for onboarding, like some of the issues with the hiring, because I agree with you. I used to believe, and I've said this before, I used to believe that you could put somebody in the right environment and really, if you had the right systems and the right processes, you could truly train anybody to be there. And I have definitely changed my mind. I don't believe that because I think people have to want it. They have to want it, they have to get it, and they have to have the capacity to do it. Otherwise, and I loved what you said before we started of every single time you should be hiring smarter. So not just doing the same thing over and over again, but truly hiring smarter.
Well, and I think that's probably where I would start. And what I have found has actually truly kind of revolutionized the person that we've been getting in those seats, just to start with. Once they're in the seats or you've already had them, it's often hard to train up motivation or train up personality change or train up something that, was never there in the first place.
Right.
You can't. You can't do that. And that's kind of a tough thing. And I hear that a lot. It's like, well, what if I have already hired these people? Well, that we can have that as a different podcast.
We totally can. That's a different one. We're being proactive, not reactive. So let's fix
that's exactly it.
Process.
And that's exactly it. Is, you can only do what you can do now. And that is, we kind of revolutionized how we hired in the first place. And part of that is we truly now make our ads. Kiera we Kiera them. Is that a word? Kiera
I like
them?
I don't Kiera. I've just become a word, you guys.
I trademark it.
Perfect.
But we made it to where our ads actually attracted the exact type of person we wanted, screened out most of the people that, probably weren't going to be a great fit for our organization. And then our first kind of line of defense in this is my executive assistant who works from home, who sends those candidates our core values ahead of time and says, this is what time we'll talk to you. We will reference back to these, so have them ready. And on that first phone call, she kind of has a list of a few questions that she goes through. She types them up and grades them from an A to a F, more or less, and does discuss with that candidate those core values and, what resonates with them, what don't they find that they're probably quite as strong in. And then she rates them. And then if they are an A or B plus, they'll move on to Debbie. Debbie then will bring them in for kind of a one-on-one interview with a second set of questions. And this doesn't have to take long. We have been able to kind of shorten it for sure. But we found that as we went through Andrea, then Debbie, then usually we get them in for that working interview with whatever department they're in, that department. And our department heads are sitting down for at least 30 minutes, if not 60, and reviewing with that potential candidate. Once again, here's how our core values and the essence of your job, not just here's the systems and the processes, but truly here's the essence of your job, what it feels like, that intangible kind of quality that we look for. They sit with those people and actually, as best as possible, paint that picture of what it feels like, what the essence is like when they work here. And so by that point, that candidate is almost on their own. And we've had a few who've gotten only to say Debbie and we're like, hey, listen, I can tell already, this is not a punch in, punch out. I'm probably not going to be a great fit here.
Yes.
And, we've had some who got through the working interview and sat with Brittany, the back office department head. And Brittany's phenomenal at sitting with these people and really explaining the essence. And, they will be like, oh, okay, yeah, I kind of just wanted to just sit chairside and talk to the patients. Well, that's amazing. That just may not work.
This is just not the location for you. And there's plenty of other opportunities.
And that's where it's like, I used to get so bent out of shape or so desperate and just whoever and however and whatever, or, offended if things didn't work out. And now it's such the opposite where I feel like, gosh, if we just hire smarter, it's truly the kindest thing for that person and for our team. So that's kind of the process that's then got the right kind of attitude in the door in the first place. And then we can move on to streamlining and figuring out a better onboarding process.
I really, really love what you said about these processes, because believe it or not, and this is not, you guys, Summer and I don't talk about every single thing we do in our lives. So it's super interesting because at our last quarterly meeting, I was looking and I thought, what's preventing us from hiring better consultants? Like, what is going on? And I realized what I was doing was I had Tiffany, who I honestly think Tiffany does a phenomenal job. She's got our culture. She does a great job of representing our company of who it is. So she is phenomenal for onboarding. However, I realized Tiff is the one who's interviewing candidates. So Tiffany knows how to write great ads, but then guess where Tiffany goes? Tiffany goes into offices and she coaches offices. She does not have time to call interviewees back. And so we were losing them constantly. I'm spending all this money putting ads out, but the person I had interviewing was the wrong person in the wrong seat. Not that Tiffany can't do it. She just did not have the capacity. So as soon as I switched it, we have a phenomenal girl on our team named Tina. Tina works from home. Tina has the availability to make the phone calls the second that resume comes in. We created a scorecard, and I love that you said that you have set questions that Andre did, and it's really funny because I actually have Tina rank them at the bottom, and if they don't pass a certain level, they don't pass through to the next level. Then they go to Tiffany, who has a call with them. Tiff also does the same thing with same questions to see if they pass on. And what I found is a lot of offices will tell me, hey, Kiera, we can't hire. Like, our market is so hard to hire in. Well, Summer Kassmel's up in Vail, Colorado, and I'm hiring traveling consultants, like two very hard worlds to hire in as well. But what I found is when you actually sit with them on the core values, like you were saying, and Summer, I love a lot of the things you just said. Like, I want them to start asking, like, what do you think you will excel at? And what is an area that maybe you're not as strong in with these core values at the core? Because what you've done is instead of just asking the normal questions and like rallying them and jazzing them, I mean, yes, they have many other opportunities to work in, but you just set yourself apart from other people and you standardize your process. So that way, if they filter through the whole way, then they're the person you actually want to spend the time interviewing and bringing in. And I think, Summer, you and I also, I have truly said I am not attached to hiring. I would rather work harder, per se, quote unquote, without another person in there, because I would rather not hire the wrong person, but wait until we hire the right person. But that's my mindset too.
Absolutely. And I'm so fortunate that in my offices, like my team members have that. They completely, I always say, like, protect this house. Like, this is your house and protect it, because if we let, somebody in that maybe isn't a great culture fit, they have seen, unfortunately, what can happen. And so they do protect it. And I love that, because they will say that, you know what, hey, listen, we'll rise up. And I mean, I think about Amy, my hygienist, Amy, that girl will work an entire extra day every single week just to get the right fit in, I mean, and she's done it for months at a time just because she cares so deeply about getting a great person in.
I love that. And I also think, we think we're trying to be efficient, but I will say, I think hiring poorly is the most inefficient thing you can do. So absolutely. I know it takes forever to get the right people in. And I know, Summer, you and I have had the pain of doing it. It is not fun, but I think it's less fun to fire somebody that I know is not a right fit, because I chose to be hasty in my decision, as opposed to truly screening to see, are they a good fit for me? And I also think there's another point, Summer, as I think you and I have both turned and spun the tables. Instead of being the person who's desperate to hire whomever we can, we've spun it and we're like, no. Like, we're almost looking for all the reasons that they don't fit our practice before we hire them. Like, are you really a good fit? And it's more, I'm going to hire who I really want to hire, not desperately accepting whomever's willing to throw a resume my way.
Absolutely. And I love that. I absolutely love that you said it's the most inefficient thing you can do to hire the wrong person. Because I'm like, that is like nailing it on the head, because you spend all this time and energy, training that person that's never a right fit in the first place. like, oh my heavens.
Let's try and force you to fit. It doesn't make sense.
Let's grease that square peg. Let's just keep greasing it and see if it'll fit.
Maybe one day. It's not going to, so stop trying. Like, it's so inefficient. So, okay. All of you, I hope you just took some things. I know I just took, I'm for sure going to change ours up, and I'm going to have Tina start doing core values first, have her discuss it. I think that's brilliant, because that becomes the front and foremost thing, which is ultimately what we want our team members to be resonating with. So now, Summer, let's switch gears to when we've gone through the hiring process. We've got this great person. How have you found to expedite that onboarding process? Because for me, my goal was from first interview to being in an office fully trained. I'm not just talking like haphazardly trained, fully trained. I want 1 month's time period. So I'm curious what your take is on it in your world.
Yeah. So, obviously it's a little bit different. And I will say it differs depending on, it does differ depending on past experience in the profession and what position it is. We all know that a hygienist of 10 years can probably come into another office and within 30 days pretty well understand most of the systems and things like that. Not to say that you shouldn't have everything documented as far as expectations ahead of time, because, the job does differ. But you take, say, that person in comparison, obviously, to a front office scheduling coordinator who has zero experience. That's going to take a little bit more time. But, I will be honest, I think for me this weekend, I had this epiphany of what we're doing is working. It's just not working well. And I'm saying that about my own, practices. And so, believe me, I don't love to admit that, but what I recognize is I have the same people who are being stressed out and having that burden of training on, and they're training in areas that honestly could be web-based. We just don't need a human to sit there and go through that entire process. And so, I talked to Debbie about, and here's the funny thing is for anybody who's listening, we really are working on this process right now as I'm talking to you, that Debbie and I are going to take a weekend away, and we're really going to do the deep work responsible for creating new onboarding phase 1. Because I'm sure it'll change over time. And my goal is actually to go department by department, position by position, and say, what can be web-based? Create the videos that need to be web-based. Some of that will be just for, listening audiences through DSU from some of your stuff, Kiera, because you have such phenomenal resources for doctors that honestly help to shortcut that so much as well. So we're going to use some of yours, and then create some of our own, like Amy, my lead hygienist said, she said, why not just video me doing a standard recall visit, a perio maintenance, an advanced hygiene visit, and a new patient, and let them watch that here at work, watch the whole thing, write down questions, and then, discuss. Why not have all of training of open dental done, not on the job, have it done well ahead of time by doing all the modules and then quizzing them and making sure they know it before they actually step foot on the job. Once again, we all know these big industry leaders who you think about, would they ever onboard a new team member by throwing them in? It doesn't happen. And so I thought about it. We'll do that with a scheduling coordinator and say on day 2, start answering the phone. Yikes. Like that's the ambassador for your entire company.
Totally fine. Totally fine.
Yeah. Just answer the phone. And then we're like, oh man. And then sometimes nobody's even watching them. And then that person gets overwhelmed and is gone in 6 months because they never had the direction in the first place. And by the way, I'm not judging anybody on how they do anything because I am in the same boat is my point.
Amen.
And so I've just found that if I can find a better way to consistently onboard to where it's better for my team members because I spread out the training, it's better for that new team member because they're going to feel more confident on the day 1 that they actually start working in their position. And it's better for the company overall because we'll have a standardized system amongst the offices. So that's kind of my goal coming up here for quarter 1 of 2020 is I really want to get that implemented so that we can scale and add another office and things like that.
Oh, I love it. And I love that you're willing to take the time to do it because that is the beast of doing those things that are important versus urgent. And so, we did the same thing. We realized it's taking us forever. Let's record me in an office of the most important pieces so they can literally watch an in-office visit before they even go in there. I put that on. So just so you guys know, we have ours currently on Kajabi. That's the platform I chose to put it on. Some people are loving Train You All, whatever jives for you. We put ours on Kajabi so I can actually watch the candidate going through the process and see where they are, tracking that. We created questions to make sure. And then we found ways that they would actually show their skills beforehand. So that's how we're doing it. And you're exactly right. And I have revamped this course. We are now revamping it again because once we built it, we realized, hey, guess what? We didn't get the results we wanted. Why? People are coming out of this course feeling overwhelmed and it's supposed to simplify their lives. And we realized we're teaching them too much stuff at the beginning that they don't really even have to know. We just thought that it was the most important thing. But until we started and put it down on paper and put somebody through the process, we didn't know, does it work? Does it streamline? Does it not work? But you're absolutely right, Summer. There are so many things. If you could just put it on videos, have them watch it, create ways of accountability, it's very simple. And I have another office that they do a very similar thing. And they actually have the person sit and watch it as soon as they're hired on site location for about 2 weeks. And they'll put them through certain videos. They have questions and quizzes, and they don't just say like, here's the video bank to watch. It's very structured to say like, watch these certain videos, answer these questions. Because a lot of times we think like, efficiency, just watch all these videos. Well, inefficiency, you just dumped a ton and they're not pulling out the nuggets that you find most important. So I agree with you, Summer. Asking those better questions. I love that you questioned yourself, you challenge yourself. But then it's not just an idea that you're putting on the table. You actually planned a time with your practice director to go make this, to create it, that then you can execute to your team in a very systematic way to make this onboarding process easier. And I just want to tie back to protect their house and to make their lives easier.
Yes, exactly. And believe me, it's not something that sounds super amazingly fun.
Nope, it's not.
To do. I have found that the things that tend to truly move my practices forward the most are exactly these processes that I don't love doing. And really, I can't delegate. I can't, I can't be the visionary without some sense of implementation. And so I do have to be able to kind of sit and know this is exactly kind of what I want this process to look like, and at least get it 70% of the way there before I try to delegate stuff off. So I'm not looking forward to it, but I do think, kind of like you said, it's going to really be that deep work that's going to make something long-term quite a bit more sustainable and consistent.
I totally agree. And, mine was on like 16 hours of flight time. Like I flew back and forth from the East Coast writing this process and writing it out and writing all these pieces. It was not a short amount of time. It was a whole day of training videos. But I thought about, guess what? 16 hours plus an 8-hour in-office visit, plus a few more, like let's say 30, 40 hours total time to make this, which does seem like a lot of time. But if you think about that 40 hours of time that I spent, how much time it's saving me on the back end, I promise you I've spent more than 40 hours training people inefficiently prior to this. I guarantee it.
Totally.
Guaranteed. So
totally.
Even though it feels like a huge chunk of time when spread across the lifespan of it, it's a very short amount of time. It just requires that deep work right now to do so.
Exactly. Well, and in my mind, I keep saying, like, I want to protect the people that I care about the most. And that is those department heads who I would say, like, they make me look good. They make this organization look good. They work so hard, and I want them to work smartly, not just spinning their wheels on something that doesn't matter. So I feel like me spending the time doing this is really helping to protect them and help them to be more efficient in what they're trying to do as well.
Totally. All right, you guys. So you have just gotten massive tips from Summer on how to hire and how to onboard in the most efficient way, plus asking those better questions. I just love hearing Summer's brain work on this podcast. You can just hear those wheels spinning and the way she thinks. So Summer, thank you for taking time. I totally texted you last minute to get on the podcast. So as always, I just love that we can just jive all day long. So Summer and I will be back. We've got lots more topics for you guys. But Summer, as always, thank you. Thanks for just being one of my best friends and for being on the podcast with me today.
Absolutely. And ditto right back to you. Thank you so much, Kiera.
Of course. All right, Dentally Team listeners, thank you again. And we will catch you next time on the Dentally Team. And that wraps it up for another episode of the Dentally Team podcast. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll talk to you next time.